Good day to everyone joining us, and welcome to today's X Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Digital Solutions to Optimize Facility and Asset Management in Pharma and Biotech. My name is Sonia Hunt, and it's my pleasure to be your X Talks moderator for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes. This presentation includes a Q&A session with our speaker. This webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit questions and comments for our speaker throughout this presentation by using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. Now, this chat box is located in the control panel, and that's found on the right-hand side of your screen. If you require assistance, please contact me at any time by sending me a message using that chat panel. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. Please note that this event will be recorded and made available to you for future streaming on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank CAI, who developed the content for this presentation. Since CAI was founded in 1996, they have delivered over $500 million in services for hundreds of clients across thousands of projects around the world, with offices in the US, Canada, Australia, Netherlands, Korea, Switzerland, Ireland, Italy, China, India, Singapore, and the United Kingdom. They have built an international team of over 850 professionals providing local support from a global company. Their engineering, technical, and consulting services are fully fashioned purposefully to develop mission-critical facilities at a high level of performance and reliability. When operational readiness and startup are critical, CAI helps deliver to a higher standard. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to your speaker for today's webinar, and he is Nick Armstrong, Global Director, Asset Management and Reliability at CAI. Nick holds a BS degree in Bioprocessing Science and Food Science from the North Carolina State University. He has production experience in biopharmaceutical, food, and personal care facilities, where he has served roles in process and technology development, GMP production and engineering, and asset management and reliability. Nick's roles in asset management and reliability include reliability engineer, production maintenance supervisor, and consultant, where his focus has been in early equipment management for his CapEx delivery, risk-based asset management strategy development, capital investment planning, and digital solutions for asset management professionals. Now it's my pleasure to pass over the mic and the controls over to Nick. So Nick, when you're ready, you may begin.
Good day, everyone, and thank you, Sonia, for the introduction. So over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to be covering digital solutions in facility and asset management, specifically in the pharma and biotech space. So when preparing for this talk, I wanted to put together a series of case studies. I've been to a lot of digital discussions where there's a lot of conversations around theory and different maturity models, which we'll talk about a little bit, but I wanted to give some practical digital solutions that anyone attending this call could take back to their organization tomorrow and implement. So today we're going to be talking about case studies in risk management, energy management, and lockout tagout management. None of these case studies are really designed to do a deep dive into the technology themselves. It's more to give a problem statement, how a digital solution was implemented to be able to solve that, and then what the impact of those solutions were. However, before we get into that, I would be remiss if I gave a digital solutions talk without talking about Industry 4.0 or 4.0. Industry 4.0 is this industrial revolution that we're getting into today. And since there was a 4.0, there was a 1, a 2, and a 3.0. So we're going to take a little bit of walk down memory lane. The first industrial revolution, think 19th century mechanization, right? Steam power, water power. We're using machines to take on a heavy workload that would normally be provided by human labor. The second industrial revolution, think late 19th century into the 20th century, mass production, assembly line, electricity. I like to use Henry Ford in this. If everyone along the assembly line does a little bit of work, a car goes off the other side of the assembly line. The third industrial revolution is computers and automation. We're looking at kind of mid to late 20th century into today. We now have process control systems. We now have the internet. We now have computers. We no longer have to rely on a human to kind of turn a valve or read the dial, right? We can take a process input and do some type of an automated change from there. And it brings us to today. We're just kind of getting into the fourth industrial revolution. And in this case, I like to talk about cyber physical systems. Imagine your manufacturing plant existing completely and 100% in a cyberspace that you can log into a computer and see not only the facility, but all the data underneath it. Thanks to today's computational power, we're able to build really complex AI, machine learning, and expert systems models into these types of deliveries, again, using a lot of this data and information, not only just data for the information, but information to make decisions as we get into this. So there's our walk down history lane or memory lane. And as we get into it, the next piece we'll discuss, and then we're going to have our first poll question just after this, but the digital plant maturity model. So think about your site. In the digital plant maturity model, we really look at 5 different levels as we go from pre-digital up to adaptive. So in our pre-digital side, things are manual. Very SOP, paper-based processes, paper-based batch records as we go into this. It's everything is manual, everything is on paper. Level 2, digital silos. We have some automation, but they're islands, right? The bioreactor doesn't talk to the chrome skid, doesn't talk to the EAM system. We may have an ERP system for finance and an EAM system for maintenance management, but they don't really converse. Level 3 is our connected plant. High degree of automation. Systems are integrated, right? And so I like to use, right, if an MES system is getting you set up for a batch, it checks with the CMMS or maintenance management system to say, hey, all of my calibrations and PMs up to date, and will they remain up to date during the duration of this run, right? So we have this high degree of connection between different systems. Level 4 is our predictive plant. This is a complete integrated plant network. Systems talk to systems, or equipment talks to equipment, control systems talk to control systems, business systems talk to operational systems. There's also this concept in here of real-time predictive analysis, and I think this is one of those areas where facility and asset management actually works really well. And we've been playing with the IoT or industry Internet of Things for quite some time in the sense of vibration probes and temperature probes and those pieces that are becoming kind of standard design and equipment today. And finally is our adaptive plant, right? This is our plant of the future, fully autonomized, it's self-optimizing and plug and play. So imagine, right, we just went through the COVID pandemic. Imagine a plant that can pivot on a dime, and we've been in mAb production, and we could immediately go into COVID vaccine production if needed as we go along that. So with this, Sonia, I'm going to hand it over to you for our first poll question for the group.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick. Yes, it's our first poll question, and I'm launching it now. Now, audience members, this question is done in real time, so please, your participation is strongly encouraged and very much appreciated. So if you can just pick from the below, whichever one is best suited for you. The question is, what level of digital plant maturity would you rate your site? So you have 5 options. Level 1, pre-digital plant. Level 2, digital silos. Level 3, connected plant. Level 4, predictive plant, or level 5, adapted plant. So please go ahead and cast your votes. I'll give you a few more seconds to complete this first poll question. Oh, great. It looks like we have the majority of our audience have cast their votes. There's still a few of you out there that have not. So if you can go ahead and do so now, I greatly appreciate that. Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in our first poll question. Now let's take a look at the results. So the results are here. We got 6% that are saying level 1, pre-digital plant. We have 35% at level 2, digital silos. Then another 35% are level 3, connected plant. And then 24% of our audience members are saying level 4, predictive plant. And then 0%, level 5, adaptive plant. So thank you everyone for participating in that poll question there. Before I pass it back to Nick to carry on with the presentation, Nick, what are your thoughts about the results of that?
Interesting. It's funny, I didn't expect so many in the predictive or level 4 plant. But I do think
Good.
one of the things that this shows is it is a spectrum, right? All of our
Mhm.
plants, and we mature along this. So no plant is probably 100% level 2 or 100% level 3 as you go forward, but we may be crossing that chasm between a level 2 and maturing into a level 3 over time.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, with that, we'll get into our first case study. And our first case study is going to be around risk management. I've spent quite a bit of time as a reliability engineer in my career and training reliability engineers. And one of the things that I train them is the failure modes and effects analysis, or FMEA, is one of our greatest tools in our back pocket. Okay, and FMEA, for those on the call that may not be familiar with it, it's a systematic approach to identify and prioritize risk, whether we're talking about product, process, or equipment and assets, and most specifically to take action to eliminate and reduce failures where we could start with the highest priority ones. Okay, a couple of key pieces in here. Our goal here is to identify risks. Okay, things that may not have happened yet. How do we prioritize those risks? And then most importantly, at the end, we want to make sure that we take action. Now, anytime we come into these activities, this picture down here below looks eerily familiar to an Excel spreadsheet, and someone shows up with an Excel spreadsheet, a blank Excel spreadsheet, and says, let's do an FMEA. So when we engage with this particular client, I'm going to go through the case study, the problem statement in just a minute. We identified a couple of major pain points as we went through. Number one, that guy shows up with an empty spreadsheet and says, well, let's do an FMEA, right? We're starting from scratch. FMEAs require a lot of cross-functional people in a room to do these correctly. You have a lot of humans sitting in a room. And as such, that exercise can be highly subjective, okay? And we see this in what depth of failure modes does the team collectively come to? What is the scoring? Is it and you can spend hours arguing over, is this a 3 or is this a 4 when it comes to severity, occurrence, or detection. The third one is many of these become incredibly resource intensive. Like I said, you can have 7 to 10 cross-functional people sitting in a room for weeks at a time to go through this. And a lot of folks may not engage in FMEAs, even though we know that these things are really powerful tools because the amount of time that they take. And fourth, a lot of times these are treated as a one-time activity, right? We go through, somebody says, let's do this. You sit down, you do your FMEA, you come out with your risk register at the end, and when you're done, it sits on someone's desktop, someone's desk drawer, or maybe in a shared file somewhere, but it kind of doesn't get looked at again. And so with that, Sonia, is our second poll question.
Thank you very much, Nick. I'm going to launch our second poll question, and there it is. At your site, which pain point below do you experience the most when conducting an FMEA? Starting from scratch each time, high subjectivity, resource intensive, or one-time activity? I'll give you about 20 seconds to complete this poll question, and then as I did before, we will look at the results together and then go right back to Nick. Okay, that looks like it's the majority of everyone. I'll give a few more seconds. Okay, perfect. Thank you everyone for participating in poll question number 2. I'm now going to close the polls. Okay, so the results are here. We got 13% that are saying starting from scratch each time, then 33% are saying high subjectivity, and we have 40% of our audience members are saying resource intensive, and then 13% saying one-time activity. Now, I want to know what your thoughts about those results, Nick. Curious here.
Yeah, so kind of as I suspected, right? So high subjectivity and high resources required to do this. And it was interesting as we were preparing for this, I said I didn't put an other, only because the other being a lot of folks and the high subjectivity of that question would have been in there. So I try not to violate my own rules.
Okay, thank you.
Very cool. Okay, so case study number 1 in risk management. So we were working with a client who had recently experienced several catastrophic equipment failures that were actually impacting supply chain. They were stocking out in product. And the last time they had gone through an exercise like this, they clocked these FMEA activities requiring around 500 hours per piece of equipment. And that's where we get into the really resource intensive side of it. Another piece that they brought up was their failure trending mechanism in their CMMS was not really effectively being used, and so it's worth a quick discussion on that. In most, if not all, computerized maintenance management systems or CMMSs, they have the capability to include work order close codes. And at the end of the work order, a technician is given a series of codes to choose from around what failed, what caused the failure, and what action was taken. And what we find many times in this case is those codes are either really ambiguous, which means the technician, they're very, many of our technicians are very literal in how they handle things. And so they may not be giving you the exact right answer because of the ambiguity of it. And really the second one comes in, a lot of times these catalog codes can be thousands of codes, okay? And if you ask a technician to say, pick one of 1,000 codes that are sitting in my system, you're most likely going to get not applicable or code not found. So we wanted to be able to optimize that as we went into it as well. Inside, so we began to create this application. This application had a few things going for it. Number one, it was cloud-based, right? So we can log in and take a look at this application from anywhere in the world, right? With the right permissions and whatnot inside the role. Number two, they would go through, and I'm not going to show this part, it's not a live demonstration of the tool, but they would go through and identify what system are we working on, what's the purpose of the system, how does it function, what are the functional failures associated with these, and then they begin to add components, things like diaphragm valves and tanks and pumps and those pieces as we go through. And what we found is that, quite honestly, a pump is a pump and a valve is a valve, and they all kind of fail the same no matter where they're used. And so what we created, and what you'll see up on the screen is some of our management templates. What we created was a library of components. So the one example that's given up here is the pneumatic diaphragm valve, right? It only fails so many different ways. And when we went into these exercises, some teams would come out with one or two of the failure modes. Some teams would come out with more failure modes than this. But we wanted to be able to lower that subjectivity and be able to give 80% of the answers as we go into this from our library. So you can see it'll give you, as you drop the diaphragm valve into the tool, it brings forward with it this failure mode, this cause, and the effect. These are all certainly changeable once you get into the system, but at least it gives you a starting place to work from instead of starting with that blank sheet of paper. The other piece to call out here is you'll notice we have failure modes and we have cause modes. When we said earlier in the work order close code side, we typically choose from a failure code, a cause code, and an action code. And these failure and cause codes are much more applicable to what a technician is going to be seeing in the field. So we went through this process, we kind of built this over time as we went, and each evolution we went through with the team, it just got better and better because our libraries got better and better as we went. Now, one of the things that we experience when we go through these FMEA sessions is when we get down to scoring. Okay, scoring, ask a room full of 10 people what the score should be. And then, like I said, you're going to argue over, is this a 3 or a 5? Is this an 8 or a 2? And you'll have these long drawn out discussions about it. What we built into this is once we're inside of a failure mode and we're working within this very specific discrete failure mode in here, we're going to ask a series of questions, right? Our cause and our effect, all these pieces up here at the top are coming from our library themselves, and you can change them any which way that you need to. But we also define what our current risk mitigation is going to be down here on the lower hand side. Based on the decisions or based on the entries into these fields, it forward predicts what your scores should be based on the initial configuration when it was set up. So in this case, it results in operational reduction and bioburden. So the severity is a 6. We do a 2-year change out. And it's an evident failure. When the diaphragm fails in this case, we put the detection here at a 6. Again, This is just the system helping you figure out kind of where it lies, and you can change these any which way that you go. One of the future aspects that we've actually taken a look at this is once there's enough data in the system, then it can come in and not only future or predict what it thinks the scores are based on the entries you put up here, but it'll say, hey, within this failure mode, within this component, within this type of a system, industry average is a 5 plus or minus 0.2, just to give a little more guidance to a project team. Over here on the right-hand side, you're going to see this green button that says RPN of 72. 72 is 6 times 2 times 6 as we go down. And what I didn't share with you just yet is the risk threshold that we defined up front for this particular system was 100. So anything that scores over 100, action needs to be taken. In this case, it was under 100, so it remains green. In this next slide, I've taken the same failure mode, but I've kind of switched it up a little bit, okay? In this case, we said we're not gonna do a change out. We're just gonna run this thing to failure, and there's little to no detection. So it forward projects over here a detection score of an 8, and then I artificially bump the occurrence over here to a 4. You'll find this other screen pops up and says, okay, your RPN value is 192, which is above your threshold. What are you gonna do about it? The team goes through and comes up with some form of a mitigation action that again is predicted down here on the score that can be tweaked. And it says, based on this information, your new score, if you were to put these in place, is 84. And we've included this delta screen over here. And this becomes important when we're going in to take action on something. In this case, we could take all of our RPN scores for the system and add them up, and maybe they would come out to say 50,000 for all of our RPN scores. I can now take the output from this exercise and say, I want to reduce my score by 10% or 5,000 points so I can order my impacts by delta or by original RPN and start checking off the box as I implement solutions. Looking at what we call digital success in this case, I went back to the pain points and started taking a look at what aspects of the application were we able to take a look at. So the component library really helps us get there started from scratch. High subjectivity and resource intensive, I think those are the two highest ones coming out of the poll that we had. The predictive scoring in the component library really helped to standardize how we approach this. And this little arrow down here of 60%. We were actually able to lower the total resource or total hours required to get into this by 60%. And then inside of this one-time activity, we fed the close codes back into the work order with the intention of those would come back out of the system the next time you wanted to run the same thing to maybe optimize those occurrence scores a bit. And then it is a cloud-based application, so we're able to it doesn't just sit on someone's desktop and hopefully someone hears about it and decides to use it. It's sitting in where the entire company has the ability to get into it. Case study number 2, energy monitoring. This one was a really cool case study, one that we were a part of, but it was really between two other organizations. So the intent here was to reduce overall energy consumption by identifying and repairing failed or inefficient operating equipment. Now, as asset management and facilities managers, frequently we need advocates within our company to help us drive improvements. And in this case, we use sustainability. And one of the things that I make the claim of is a system operating in its lowest energy state is generally at its highest reliability state, given an operational context, right? So if it's having to work harder to produce the same results, something is probably on its way to getting broken, right? And so if we can monitor the energy side, we can actually improve the reliability of the system. Now, there's lots of systems out there. There's lots of building automation systems that are trying to get into fault detection as you go into it, but there are some pain points in this case too. Predominantly siloed faults. You get an alarm, and that alarm is siloed within this one failure mode that you see within this system. It's not an overarching conclusion that you can draw from a lot of your alarms, and then there's a lot of nuisance alarms. Limited diagnostics. You get an alarm, but what do you do about it? Okay, and so in this case study, you're going to see an answer to that. I put in this piece here, high energy, low reliability. Many of us have aging facilities who's drawing quite a bit of energy, and it's making our systems less and less reliable over time. And then to be perfectly honest, and I'm going to go into some of the background into fault detection and diagnostics, but this gets really messy and complex. Okay, and so with these pain points in mind, walk in a case study between KGS Smart Buildings and Amgen. Now, KGS Smart Buildings was founded out of MIT's Building Science Department in 2008, and they focus on enhancing building operations and improving performance through AI systems. Okay, and we're going to get a little bit into kind of the technical or the science behind this, but I are not an expert in this, and I won't try to pretend to this group to be so. So KGS Smart Buildings and Amgen partnered in 2016 to deploy an HVAC solution. In this scenario, they launched 6 global sites, 3 in the US, 3 outside of the US. The HVAC systems were serving over 6.5 million square feet. And just so you know that we didn't cheat in the case study, when not only were we looking at office spaces, but we were also looking at lab and manufacturing spaces. Many of the systems that we take a look at in fault detection, they may work really well for administrative and lab scenarios, but once you get into manufacturing and the demands that are necessary and required in those systems, some of these can fall short. In this next slide, I'm going to step through this and know that I'm stepping through this as I am not an expert in this field, but I'm going to try to explain this the best I can on how the KGS Smart Building solution works. On the left-hand side, you have this typical fault detection for a leaking hot water valve. We have a reading that is out of range. It's trying to prove that the system is on, and then it's going to give you some options down here that's going on. Now, this is one failure mode in one system. It did not give me what to do about anything, and there are literally hundreds of thousands of million different permutations of this, and this is where we get into the it's messy and complex side. What this solution brings in is through artificial intelligence. Okay, now when we think about artificial intelligence, there's a lot of discussion around this. And one of the biggest fields in this is machine learning. And then finally, as we get into deep learning, okay? And this is where we pump a system full of a bunch of different data, and these are the inputs and these are the outputs, and the data or the system tries to diagnose or come up with answers on its own. There's a different field within artificial intelligence called expert systems, and that's what's being depicted down here below. You have the knowledge from an expert coming in and generating this rules engine, and then there's input from a user that comes back out and gives you some advice on what to do. In a kind of what we see every day, I like to compare this to like tax software, right? You got TurboTax on your machine. They don't just take in a whole bunch of tax returns and then, or a whole bunch of W-2s and tax information and then spit out answers from that. Instead, there's a whole system of tax law built into these systems where it's being able to, built from a tax expert to be able to go through this. In this case, KGS Smart Buildings was the expert in this piece. They've built lots of models and kind of templates of models. So they come in and build their informational model that's specific to your system. It's specific to the HVAC system that you deployed. It also doesn't require every single data point that could be useful. You can see here that, if we don't have, this data point, we're not going to be able to come to the conclusion. In this case, the system is actually built to be able to deal with quite a bit of that ambiguity. And there's my 5-minute TED Talk on fault detection and diagnostics as we go through it. So the process that was used by the project. So they took data in from 6 different sites around the world, and it went in through their PI historian. As it passed through their PI historian, it goes through the KGS smart building software, and then that with an energy team comes up with a set of prioritized solutions and goes right into site executions. One of the things that's really interesting about the software is using your local utility rates, it prioritizes your actions by energy savings. So if it comes in and says, hey, we've detected a high temperature fault, and it looks like it's the hot water valve that's chattering, and this is going to save you, given your local utility rates, $14,000 a year, and it's one of our top 5 alarms, it will bring that into the system. Not only does it give you what the fault is and ordered by the cost of energy, but it also gives you a series of corrective actions that you can take. Now, in this case, this is where CAI came in to be the global remote monitoring system up in the Rhode Island facility, and we took these corrective actions as we went in, double-checked the system to make sure that the corrective action made sense, and then issued a work order to the execution team at one of the sites to go out and address the failure. The conclusion of this case study, again, is we're talking 6 global sites, serving 6.5 million square feet of space in office, lab, and manufacturing space. The total investment by Amgen in this case was a little over $1 million at the time of the case study. There were some pieces around, making sure that they had firewalls between their BAS systems and the KGS smart building system. But what they were able to lower across all 6 sites, they were able to lower total energy consumption by 5%. And this ultimately led to nearly a $4 million total savings. One of the things that you're going to get as a part of this presentation is a handout that talks about this case study specifically. There's case study number 2. Case study number 3, lockout tagout management. Look, in facilities, our work inherently has safety implications, right? We have to control hazardous energy, whether that be electrical, pressure, temperature, chemistry, whatever those pieces are. We work around systems every single day where our technicians are exposed to risk and the need to control that hazardous energy. So in this, we're actually going to step outside of pharma for a second. And we're going to go into the data center world, but I'm going to tie that back in where this will come into biotech and pharma in just a moment. But in this piece, the question gets asked, can I do lockout tagout planning and execution from my phone? And so, Sonia, this takes us to the poll question number 3, and I'll turn it back to you for this poll question.
Okay, thanks, Nick. All right, here we go. And there's a question, how do you manage lockout tagout in your organization? So there's 3 options below. Please go ahead and select one. Is it 100% paper-based planning and execution, or is it some automation in planning and execution, or the final option, fully digital planning and execution? Please go ahead and cast your votes, and then we'll take a look at the results and get right back to Nick. Oh, perfect. That looks like it's almost everyone. Just a few more seconds here I'll give you. All right, perfect. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating in poll question number 3. Let's take a look at the results. Okay, so how do you manage lockout tagout in your organization? We have here 55% are saying 100% paper-based planning and execution. Then we have 35% are saying some automation in planning and execution. And then we have just 10% saying fully digital planning and execution. Nick, I'm curious to find out what your thoughts are on those results.
Yeah, to be honest, I expected like 99% to be in the 100% paper-based planning and execution, because that's the only experience that I have in there where you have a lockout, tagout, checklist on a piece of paper, and you execute from paper only. So Interesting. There is some automation out there. That's great.
Okay.
All right, so again, like the other ones, we wanted to take a look at specific pain points, and I'm actually going to hit this concept twice, okay? In this particular case study, we're talking about a construction site. We're not talking about a site that's up and running, but we're in the middle of building it. We are constantly energizing and de-energizing, and systems are being built in real time. So everything is in constant flux. When we have that, lockout tagout planning and lockout tagout execution. Planning, hey, maybe I forgot about a node, or in the execution I should have locked out this node and instead I locked out this node over there, but it's fraught with human error. Time delays. In a construction site, and especially in this data center side that I'm going to show, they spend hours trying, determining what the lockout tagout plan is going to be. That's quite a bit of downtime as we get into it. These construction sites have large lockout tagout management teams. Okay, so there's a lot of resource there, and there's minimal visibility, right? If you're working from a paper-based system, I can't log into a system and see what is safe to work on, what's not safe to work on. I can't look at my plant as a whole and take a look at that. Because this is lockout tagout and because this is a safety implication, I wanted to reiterate again. Now, these are some statistics that come out of OSHA, NFPA sources. So every year, US companies lose nearly $1 billion to lockout tagout related incidences. 28% of all electrical related injuries result in more than 31 days missed. And as a US entity, nearly 85,000 days lost in work. From 2011 to 2016, nearly 10,000 injuries, and from 2007 to 2016, 1,651 deaths. So the stakes are real as we go through this when we look at the safety of what our technicians can work at within their environment. And I cannot stress that enough as we go through this. So in this case study, they were working, in this case study, working on managing a large data center construction project. Some of the key points here. They went in and it was a 5-week project. They executed it so that everything was done the way that the site normally executes their lockout tagout, and they ran the auto lotto solution in parallel to it. This particular site had over 2,000 nodes. The company trained 30 trained clients, client users in that space, and they executed over 80 lockouts during this time. The key points here: in 5 weeks, over 2,000 nodes are loaded, 30 people are trained, and 80 lockout tagouts are executed during this piece. So I want to show where some of these pieces come in, especially around visibility, that I thought were really interesting. So on the left-hand side, you see a phone screenshot. This is main switchboard 1. In order to lock out, these are the isolation nodes that you need to take a look at. It gives you the 5, right? They've gone in, they've built out the entire data center within this. And when I need to lock out this particular system and make it safe, without going through 50 to 100 electrical one-line drawings to figure out where this node gets locked out, it's actually baked right into the software. On the right-hand side, this is what a data center looks like in one infinite plane, right? So this is a combination of all of the electrical drawings that are in there, from the utility pole or supply of power all the way down to the server bays as we get in there. From a color coding perspective, and what I personally think is one of the most powerful things on this, if it's red, it's unsafe to work on. If it's green, it's safe to work on, right? And it's safe to work on because we've identified the nodes, we've executed the lockout, and we've done our live testing, and all of that was done and tracked and auditable directly in the mobile application on the phone. So I thought this was a really good graphic to be able to show a live data from a data center on what's safe and what's not safe to work on. But what are the results in this particular case? In this 5-week period, when they were done, they went back to the site safety person and said, based on the near misses and incidences that occurred during this period, which one of those would have been prevented by using auto lotto as the solution? They came to the conclusion that it would be 40%. They said which ones may have been prevented at 35%, and they came back and said about 25% of them, auto lotto wouldn't have been able to prevent that. So just in this alone, in those 80 lockouts in this time period, being able to reduce, absolutely reduce by 40% and potentially by 75% is quite powerful. In our pain points, we stated that it takes a lot of time to plan and execute these evolutions. Single lockout points, they found that during the planning of it, they were able to reduce the total amount of time to plan that evolution by about 2/3. Where the real power came in was when we were doing multiple complex lockouts, we were able to reduce time specifically in planning of those, planning and coordination, by over 90% in those pieces. And like I said before, I stepped outside of our pharma world, out of our biotech world. I frequently do that when I'm looking for digital solutions out there. This tool currently is 100% electrical capable, but to note that mechanical is launching later this year. So while you may only begin on the electrical side and going through those pieces, there's on this company's product roadmap, they're launching into pressurized pipe mechanical that will make it certainly much more useful in the pharma and biotech space. So with that, Sonia, I'm going to hand it over to you for the fourth and final poll question.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick, first of all, for that great presentation and for sharing all that wealth of information. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And before we begin the Q&A, let's do our final poll question, and I'm going to launch it now. And there you go, audience members, you should see it appear. And the question we have for you is, which digital solution would you most likely bring to your organization? So you have a couple of options below: risk management with FME app, energy management with KGS smart buildings, or lotto management with Auto Lotto. Please go ahead and cast your vote, and then we'll take a look at the results and get right into the Q&A. And remember, you can send those questions through by using that questions window, and we'll try to attend to your questions with the time that we have together. But for right now, let's take a look at the results. I'm now going to close the polls, everyone. Okay, so here are the results. We have 43% that are saying risk management with FME app, 43% again with energy management with KGS smart building. And then finally, we have 14% saying lotto management with Auto Lotto. So thank you everyone for participating in our final poll question. And now we're going to begin the Q&A portion of the webinar. And with that, we'll put on our webcam. So Nick, you can put on yours. And here I am, everyone. Hi. And there's Nick. Perfect. All right. All right, so let me just get these questions lined up here. Just give me 1 second and we will begin. Okay, so here's our first question. This audience member is asking, what is a realistic time frame to go from digital maturity level 2 to level 3? That's an interesting one.
Good question. And I'm going to give the super consulty explanation of this, that it depends, right? You're going to start first and foremost with getting senior management on board. Coming up with your structure, coming up with your strategy on how you get there, and then figuring out how you're going to be able to design all of your systems so that they can be integrated. So I will say that today it's generally looked at as the current best standard is trying to launch facilities into that level 3 as you go, and then maturing up to 4 and 5. But those are some kind of new best practices that go forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick, for that. Let's go to our next question. And remember, audience members, you can send your questions through using that questions window. And let's look at this one here. All right, so this audience member is asking, can you explain how to efficiently execute the FMEA? Because these typically take us a long time and we have a lot of data to manage.
Great question. Yeah, so the FMEA, two things that I look at if we really want to dig into the efficiency of the systems. The first one is facilitation is key, right? There's a lot of information to go into, but I see more FMEAs get derailed because once you get into that cross-functional room, the conversations go out the window. You end up rabbit holing down certain pieces. You'll always have that one person in the room who's dominating the conversation, and the ability to facilitate it is incredibly important. And then the second piece is one of the things that we train our reliability engineers on is you are not allowed to walk into the room with a blank piece of paper. Okay, you are not allowed to walk into the room with a blank Excel sheet. the prep work needs to be done. You're actually putting the answers in and then having the cross-functional team validate your answers as you go through, and adding as you go, but never walk into the room with a blank piece of paper.
Okay, thank you so much, Nick. And that looks like it's, oh wait, hold on there. Oh, here's another question that has just come in. Could you talk a little bit more about predictive maintenance and how that can tie into things like energy monitoring and reliability?
So predictive maintenance, when we take a look at predictive maintenance, and really we're taking a look at kind of your predictive tools, right? So vibration sensors and ultrasound sensors and those alike, that helps us add greater detail to the problem. Okay, we now have more information at our fingertips to help us guide us along those pieces. So what I generally advise on most clients is start with the information that you have. We have tons of sensors out there in systems already. And then add predictive tools or predictive elements as you go through. When you are hitting a wall where you don't have enough data to come to those answers. So I would love to tell you that predictive maintenance and predictive tools are the end all be all and the answer to everything, but they simply give us more information or more data so that we can make those decisions. But they do play, the IIoT or industry Internet of Things plays a tremendous role in getting the information that we need. Oh, sorry, Sonia, I have you on mute.
Oh, I have myself on mute. I was just saying, Nick, it's a pleasure. It sounds like you're a great person to work with. You're very thorough and also a great personality there. So thanks. And I just want to say thank you very much, everyone, for participating in today's Q&A portion. It looks like those are all the questions that have come in. So thank you very much for sending those questions in. But if you have any further questions, or send in your inquiries, please direct them to solutions@cagents.com. They'll be more than happy to follow up with you with any of your inquiries. So thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from X-Talks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen. Your participation is strongly encouraged and appreciated, as it will help us to improve on our further webinars. Now give me a few seconds. I'm going to send you a link in your chat box with the link to this recorded event, and please share that link with your colleagues once they register for the recording as well. And get even more out of today's presentation by downloading the supporting materials that are available under the Handouts tab. And we have two there for you. One is Energy Management Support, and the other one is Leading Worksite and Electrical Safety with Smart Software. Now, please join us in thanking our speaker, Nick, for that very insightful presentation and for answering our questions. So thank you, Nick.
Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks for attending, and I look forward to future feedback.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Nick. We hope you found this webinar informative. It has been my pleasure to be your webinar moderator. On behalf of the team here at X-Talks, we thank you for joining us. I'm Sonia Hunt. Until next time, please take care and bye for now. Okay, bye, Nick. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.